know how bad it could be. I mean, that's kind of a ludicrous way to run an insurance company. I know nobody in the private sector that run an insurance company says, I don't want the best information to make my decisions. I'm just going to guess.
As you talk about mitigation efforts, as you talk about the need for better mapping and for better information to communicate to the public what their risk actually is, it makes me wonder why you aren't just saying mapping is the highest priority right now and why an effort to potentially cut it isn't a big deal.
Well, for the National Flood Insurance Program, it is a big deal. Quite honestly, I think the reason why it got proposed cutting was somebody tied it to a word climate change, which is kind of bizarre to me. If we're going to be an insurance company, we need the best data to make sure we're making the best investments on behalf of the taxpayers and not growing the taxpayers' risk.
FEMA public assistance for Louisiana has averaged almost $1 billion a year since the turn of the century, in part driven by a couple of these major events. Where has that money come from in the past, and where might it come from if there's serious cuts to the agency?
You pay that. That $1 billion is your money. The funding mechanism that Congress uses to appropriate your tax dollars is called the Disaster Relief Fund. And that is a fund that is set up to pay for uninsured losses of a disaster.
If the Disaster Relief Fund is cut, the place that could have a pretty strong effect then would be places where there are late season hurricanes, like along the Gulf Coast, right?
Yes, as well as earthquakes, which don't have a season. The Disaster Relief Fund also is the initial response cost to those disasters.
What's the biggest stride that FEMA's made since the response to Hurricane Katrina? And is there a way that you could say it was visible in your response last year to the Louisiana floods?
Yeah, we don't wait to know it's bad. We want to be as close to the area of impact with the state as possible. And in the case of Louisiana, where this was an event that was not a named storm, but was already occurring, in many cases, historically, we would wait until we had done assessments. Well, in the Louisiana floods, it was quite obvious that this was a big response operation. We didn't have to wait for those assessments. Because Governor Edwards and the team in Louisiana were managing the response quite well with their resources, we went pretty much right into the biggest challenge, which was the housing that would be required in the aftermath of that flood.
What do you wish had worked better about FEMA's response last year to Louisiana's flood?
Because we lost so much housing, our traditional tools of renter's assistance, putting people in hotels and motels, there just wasn't enough. And many people ended up in shelters far longer than we would have wanted people in shelters. But the bottom line that you run into is if you lose the homes, there's no quick way to replace them. It's really got to go longer term of how are we building and where are we building and how do we build better so that the next flood, the next wind event, the next earthquake doesn't destroy so many homes that we're now left with little or no options for the people that have been impacted.
Craig Fugate, thank you very much.
Thank you.